The crowds following Jesus had grown larger with each passing day. People came from villages near and far, drawn by stories of miraculous healings and powerful teaching. Some sought cures for their ailments. Others were simply curious about this new teacher whose words seemed to carry unusual authority. One morning, seeing the multitude gathering around him, Jesus climbed the slopes of a hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee. As he ascended, his closest followers, the disciples who had left everything to follow him, gathered close, forming an inner circle. Behind them, the crowd settled on the grassy hillside, a colorful tapestry of humanity. Farmers with calloused hands, mothers cradling infants, merchants in finer clothes, laborers with weather-beaten faces, and even a few who hung back at the edges, tax collectors, and others considered outcasts by society. When Jesus reached a natural place to speak, where his voice would carry across the hillside, he sat down. In the tradition of Jewish rabbis, this posture signaled he was about to teach with authority. The crowd hushed in anticipation. What they were about to hear would not be a simple sermon, but a revolutionary manifesto of a new kingdom, one that would challenge every conventional notion of success, power, and righteousness. Jesus looked out at their expectant faces, faces etched with the struggles of daily existence under Roman rule, faces that reflected hopes for deliverance and a better life. Then he began to speak. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The words hung in the air, unexpected and jarring to many ears, in a world where strength, wealth, and power were celebrated. Jesus was pronouncing blessing on spiritual poverty, on those who recognized their need for God. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Heads nodded throughout the crowd. Everyone had experienced loss. Everyone had tasted grief. Yet Jesus was suggesting that sorrow itself could be a pathway to blessing. "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." At this, some exchanged confused glances. The meek? Inherit the earth? This contradicted everything they knew about the world, where the strong took what they wanted and the meek were trampled underfoot. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." With each statement, Jesus painted a picture of a kingdom unlike any earthly realm they had known. A kingdom where values were turned upside down, where the first would be last and the last would be first. "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." His gaze swept across the crowd, settling briefly on his disciples. "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Jesus paused, letting his words sink in. Then his voice strengthened as he continued. "You are the salt of the earth," he told them. "But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." Some of the fishermen nodded, understanding the value of salt for preserving their catch. "You are the light of the world," Jesus continued. "A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Jesus' eyes seemed to pierce through the assumptions that many held about his purpose. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. He leaned forward, his voice both gentle and firm. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Then, with words that stunned many of the religious among the crowd, he added, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." A murmur went through the crowd. Surpass the righteousness of the Pharisees? These were men who dedicated their lives to meticulous observance of every detail of the law. How could ordinary people hope to exceed that? But Jesus was just beginning. Moving from general principles to specific examples, he set out to redefine what true righteousness looked like, not as external compliance, but as inward transformation. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. The crowd grew still. This was not just a new interpretation of the law. This was a radical expansion of it. Jesus was addressing not just actions, but attitudes, not just behavior, but the heart behind it. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Men shifted uncomfortably. Jesus was setting a standard that went far beyond outward obedience. You have heard that it was said, "Eye for eye and tooth for tooth." But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now people exchanged alarmed glances. This seemed to contradict the justice system they had known all their lives, the carefully balanced scales of retribution. You have heard that it was said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. The most radical teaching came last. Love enemies, pray for persecutors. This flew in the face of human instinct and cultural norms. Jesus looked out at the crowd, his expression both challenging and compassionate as he delivered his final statement on the matter. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western hills. The sermon had stretched across the afternoon, yet few in the crowd had noticed the passing of time. They sat in silence now, absorbing the weight of what they had heard, teachings that would eventually spread across continents and centuries, challenging and inspiring countless generations to come. What Jesus offered on that hillside was not merely a set of ethical guidelines, but an invitation to a transformed life in a new kingdom, a kingdom not of this world, yet breaking into this world through the lives of those who would follow him. As the crowd slowly dispersed to return to their homes and daily routines, many found themselves unable to shake the words they had heard. Something had shifted in their understanding of God, of righteousness, and of what it meant to live a truly blessed life. The Sermon on the Mount had begun.